Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your hosts, Tim and Des.
Alrighty, it is this week's Momentum. It is Tim and Des with you once again. And hey, wherever you are listening to us right now, thanks so much for spending some time with us as we delve into another show. Des, isn't this just such an exciting space when we get to do Momentum? Isn't it just such a wonderful space to be?
You know, it's just such a blessing. It truly is. And, you know, I had a guy in Port Macquarie, just as a byline, who said that he uses the Momentum show and the website to engage with men on the street as he does his ministry. And I just love that, you know, people are able to go to our website. And saying that, MomentumAustralia.org is our website. Lots of information on there, all our previous podcasts, lots of support in their website in itself. And you actually can get access to YouTube. And we've got a YouTube channel, which we've taken a lot of our old videos, and now you can see us as well as hear us. And while that's good for a bloke like Tim, who's a good-looking bloke, for no bloke like me, it's not so good. So, yeah, great to be here. I totally agree, man. It's such a blessing.
Yeah, it is. Certainly check out the website, MomentumAustralia.org. And look, just quickly, we do things pretty leanly here at Momentum. We are a ministry. Des and I just have a heart to reach men all around Australia. And as it happens, it's turning out throughout the world as well through our podcast, which is amazing. So if you'd like to support that and get behind us as we do that and be a part of that with us, we would really genuinely love your support at MomentumAustralia.org. And talking of support, you know, I to bring the tone slightly differently right now, but this is really, really important. And this really actually is one of the heartbeats behind Momentum. In the last 24 hours, Des, I have heard of two men who have sadly taken their lives. And one of them I found out about on Facebook. Somebody posted from Brisbane, who you and I both know. And he did an outpouring saying one of his best friends had just taken his life. And then I had a coffee with somebody this morning, and he was talking about a church that he was attached to that had a quite an active youth group, but one of the young kids who was 22 took his life last week. So this has all happened in the last 24 hours. And I say that to say we bleat on a lot in Momentum about getting connected, men getting connected. But it's not just doing stuff together. It's opening up about the stuff that's happening for you and, of course, some of your struggles. And when I hear stories like that, Des, we just want to encourage you, if you are feeling like you are struggling, do not suffer in silence. It is imperative. Please do not be another statistic that we come across in the next few weeks because you haven't reached out and you haven't actually been vulnerable with someone. Please take the step of being vulnerable. And if you need to, call the Momentum Care Line. That is why it is there. 1-800-000-636. 1-800-000-636. You can have a confidential chat about anything. You're not going to be judged. It is a safe space for you to have a conversation that you might need to have. And hear us. Our heart is that you would do that rather than take your own life and leave this world and, of course, be another statistic. But the impact that has on your family and friends that you leave behind is huge.
And don't forget, by the way, 24 hours a day, Lifeline is an organization you reach out to for people who are getting to that point in their life where they think there's nowhere to turn. Lifeline is an amazing organization, not a Christian organization, but a support organization that runs 24 hours a day. So just keep that in mind too.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, if you want to, reach out to us at MomentumAustralia.org. We will try and do our best to help you and put you in touch with people like our guest, actually, who could perhaps maybe help you in that space. You know, we'll get to that in just a moment, but let's jump into the show. You know, we've all probably heard the saying, happy wife, happy life. And while it is a bit of a fun statement that may have an ounce of truth in it, the reality is that both parties do need to feel loved and respected to have a long, happy, successful, and satisfying marriage.
You know, I hate that phrase, happy wife, happy life. Just personally. You know, the other truth is, while it's not the husband's sole role to make and keep his wife happy, there are many things that a husband can do physically and spiritually as the head of the home to sow into the health and well-being of both his wife, his marriage, and his family.
Yeah, this week we unpack what it means to be a good and godly husband with counsellor, pastor, and our good friend, of course, Steve Wickham. Welcome back to Momentum, Steve.
Thanks so much, Tim and Des. It's wonderful to be back again. Yeah.
We took a little while to get to you, man, but thank you for hanging on, because I know as your role as a counselor and a pastor, obviously, going back to that previous conversation, you've spent time in that space and you've had those conversations with blokes. It's a really, really crucial space and a needed space, right?
100%. I was just involved in the launch of a suicide prevention program on the 31st of July, only just a couple of weeks ago, through the Mental Health Commission. So that's exciting. Some exciting stuff happening to prevent suicide and to just to work in that area. But every one of us has been touched by suicide one way or the other.
Yeah. Now, before we launch into this week's topic, being a good/godly husband, I think it's fair to acknowledge, and maybe a good thing to acknowledge, that each one of us on this call has had more than one marriage.
Yes.
And I just want to be upfront about that.
That's important, yeah.
We have learned some stuff the hard way, sadly. And we want to unpack that and just kind of be vulnerable with you and say, for all three of us here on this call, we have not, married our childhood sweethearts and lived happily ever after. We've had some stuff to journey through. So, Steve, let's start off by, I suppose, unpacking this idea of being a good, in inverted commas, husband. I mean, when we say that, what do you think that actually means? What does that actually constitute, do you think, to be a good husband?
Well, God calls us to partnership in Genesis, and the very first couple of chapters of Genesis talks about marriage and how we're not designed to be by ourselves. In fact, that whole connection piece that you mentioned before is so important in a whole of life context. But the reason why we're actually designed to be married, but with marriage comes work. It becomes, love is a verb, and love is very much a case of reaching toward another person and serving the other person. And unless we can do that, we're going to struggle in relationships, and particularly in such an intimate relationship as marriages.
Yeah, and I think the serve word is a really cool one, and it's one that is forgotten in most relationships, I think, these days. Because servitude is a word that is not in our vocabulary. The young people don't talk about it. They don't understand 9 times out of 10 what it means. And so, yeah, it is absolutely key. It doesn't mean be obedient to everything your partner asks you to do, but it's an attitude of mind, isn't it?
Yeah. And, you mentioned the phrase in the intro, Des, around being the head of the home, the husband being the head of the home. There's a real paradox in that statement, because it's servant leadership. It's actually servant leadership is the way to be the right head of the home. And that is you're coming from under and you're making sure that the people are loved, the people are served from you. It comes from a base of humility.
Steve, can I put a twist on that for a second and just then say, how much of that do we struggle with as men? How much of that is our pride? How much of that is culture? Where we sometimes, there's a joke, you're under the wife's thumb or that sort of thing, or, happy wife, happy life. So I do have to just make my wife happy and suck it up. I mean, how much of that do you think men wrestle with in then taking that posture of servant leadership, do you think?
Well, being a Christian call and being a Christian ministry, we struggle with a sinful nature. So men and women struggle with our sinful nature. So we don't inherently want to serve. It's only under, following Christ that we're empowered to serve. But I guess the other thing too is and I know this is a bit of a trigger word for a lot of people, is male privilege, any sense of entitlement. And in fact, one of the best books I've used in the past, this Entitlement Cure. Not many people would probably buy a book like that, but it was so good for me. Nearly 10 years ago now. The fact that we all have the capacity for some sense of entitlement. And it's really, really important as human beings and as men, men in our marriages, to wrestle with that whole idea of, is there any sense of entitlement in me? So being very honest about that.
But just briefly, before we take a break, what would a sense of entitlement look like? What would that look like in a normal marriage?
I would put it down to one word, and the word is demand. If our wives sense we are demanding, or anybody we're in relationship with, so we can have desires, and we're there. Most relationships we're transactional, so we give and take from each other, and that's the way things work. But whenever we bring demand and things must be done my way, those kinds of things, and some of it's very nuanced, but really the time whenever we demand and someone doesn't give us what we want, then we start to judge them and we start to punish them. And that's not good, especially in marriage.
Steve, I think I've heard you mention this before, and I actually want to just keep bouncing onto that because I think it's actually really important. The phrase that you used is pocket entitlement. Is that right?
That's out of that book, the John Townsend book. That's the whole principle of it. And you can imagine none of us would consider ourselves completely entitled across all of our areas of our life, but all of us have some kind of idolatry, or all of us have some kind of what's called a pocket entitlement. So it's an area of our lives that where entitlement comes up. Certain situations, certain things I must have my own way, and they damage relationships. So it's really important to have and really you can, any sentence where you can start to say, I deserve, and then finish the sentence with I deserve. And for me, if it was I deserve respect, acknowledgement, praise, recognition, if I don't get those things, then we're in trouble in our relationship and it becomes an issue.
So how do we communicate, I suppose, preference? If we're making decisions, for example, like as husbands, and if we are called to make a final decision as the head of the home, that sort of thing. But how do we communicate, say, our preference without it sounding or coming across like I'm entitled? I'm actually really nudging this because I really want this, and it not being necessarily controlling, but it's actually, this is my preference, but I'm open to something else. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I do. If we're in a genuine marriage, we're coupled together, two people coupled as one flesh. Both people's preferences are equally important, and decisions are made mutually. That is the best basis. So both people feel that it's the right thing to do. I often think of marriage as it's two strong partners and a strong bond between them. Any time one has more control over the other, or there's an unequal yoking, it's not, say, non-Christian to Christian kind of thing, but a yoking of the difference in power, that becomes an issue. And so both people's preferences have to be taken into account. And yeah, that's it. It means it's harder work a lot of the time to come to decisions. And
it's true, you have to be mindful all the time, are conscious all the time of how you're living your life and the decisions that you're making. As men, I certainly didn't do that whenever I was my first marriage. And so, we really need to be mindful all the time, just be conscious of it.
I'm going to keep going on that thread, and then we can perhaps unpack some other stuff. But because I think this is actually quite key, because I think this can be a stumbling block for couples, right? I mean, particularly if one person wants to have their way a lot, and that seems to override that balance, if you like, in the relationship. For men listening then, how do we, if we have a wife who perhaps is quite strong and we feel like we're backing down a lot, how do we perhaps broach that with her to refine a balance in that decision-making or the preference-making?
Getting couples therapy is a good thing to try and bring insight to a partner. Men and women listening to this will know whether they're at that place or not. And sometimes it'll take months, sometimes it can take years before people realise, actually, we need some external help here.
We're talking about being a good and godly husband on this week's Momentum. We're going to take a short break. We're with Pastor Steve Wickham. And when we come back, 10 tips to being a good husband. What does that actually look like? How can we actually outwork this stuff in our lives? It is this week's Momentum. We're going to take a short break. Have a look around our website as we do that, momentumaustralia.org. And we'll be back with this week's show real soon.
This is Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
Okay, welcome back. Part 2 of this week's Momentum with Tim and Des. And of course, our special guest is Pastor Steve Wickham. And we're talking about being a good/godly husband. And so without further ado, let's let's get into these top 10 tips to being a good husband. Let's unpack some of this stuff. Actually, what I might do is quickly rattle through the 10 and then we can come back and maybe unpack. Number 1 is be her best friend, be protective. Number 2, respect her beliefs. Number 3, Number 4, show love to her, support her. Number 5, accept her faults. Number 6, don't lose the romance. Number 7, 8, talk things through. Number 9, take care of your wife. And number 10, know your spouse's love/apology language. So we're going to try and do some of this justice in the next 12 to 15 minutes. So see how we go. Now, this is pulled off Google, just FYI. So I'm not sure how accurate we think this is, but let's start with be her best friend. I mean, that is a good starting point, right?
Absolutely.
And most of our marriages is about being a companion to each other.
Yeah.
Once we've gotten past that romance, sort of lovely, romance period, 6, 12 months, 2 years, it is very much about companionship.
And you can tell when that exists. You see a couple, you see old couple walking down the street, and they're still holding hands, and they're still chatting, and doing life together, and it's just beautiful to see. It's just a really real God thing, in the sense that that's where it stems from. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Number 2 is be protective. And instantly, I think as men, we think about physically protective of our wives. But I mean, the more you unpack that, Steve, really, we're not just talking physicality here. We're talking emotionally, protecting her heart, protecting her character, and, I suppose protecting our relationship and our marriage above all.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. To me, that was a bit of a trigger as you went through the list. I had an instant reaction to being protective. I think many women, and particularly at this time in life in the 2020s, that can have such a good sort of nuance to it. I think about taking protection too far and becoming abusive. That's, to me, a bit of a flag. But I think being there and having her back, and that is all about her, what she defines as her needs. So what does protection look like for her? And I know that safety and security are one of the top needs of women, of females. I mean, but we got to get that right around what does she define that she needs to be, where's that protection coming from? Is it adding to her life, or is it something that she actually doesn't appreciate?
Number 3, respect her beliefs. And I mean, again, instantly I thought, religious beliefs. But I mean, again, this is about respecting what she believes about everything. Like, even though the opinion may differ from mine, can I respect that? Do I belittle her? Do I try and understand her instead of belittling her? I mean, that sort of stuff for me, that seems to come out of that. What do you guys think?
Oh, I was just going to say there has to be enough room in our relationship for her beliefs, for my beliefs. There needs to be enough room for that. And there's no real reason why we should be negating people's beliefs. I mean, what drew us together, if we're married, all of those kind of boxes have been ticked. So we've got we've got to really have enough space there for that. And
the key is respect on everything, right? So it is about mutual respect. Like any relationship, it is about respecting each other and respecting the differences, respecting what you have in common, respecting each other's time, respecting each other's finances, whatever that looks like. The word respect is absolutely a key one.
Number 4 is show love to her. And I mean, we've all heard the funny stories again. I mean, as we mentioned in the intro, happy wife, happy life, which I know you don't like, but we've also all heard those stories of men. And I don't know if it's actually true or whether it's just a rumor that, say, well, I said I love you on the marriage day, and if anything changes, I'll let you know. I don't know if that's actually true. Yeah, but terrible. I mean, let's be honest, an expression so that our wives do feel loved. Yeah. They have no doubt in their mind that this person that I'm hooked up to actually is demonstrating love in whatever way is possible for him, and preferably on the way that I can receive.
And the biggest test of all of that is, does she feel loved? Does our wife feel loved? I mean, I can say that I'm loving my wife really well and that sort of thing, but if she doesn't feel loved, it has no impact and no consequence. And so how she feels is the important thing in this.
And again, one of the things we talked about before is, if you've gone through marriage, you should have at least asked that question at some point in your dating time. It's just like, how can I show you that I love you?
that again comes down to love languages, which
Yes, it does,
is essentially number 10. I mean, it's like, have we actually taken time to understand how not only ourselves give and receive, but our wives give and receive love? And then are we speaking that language? Because I think often we, like you said, Steve, we can be demonstrating love in a way that feels easy to us, but it may actually be not hitting the mark when it comes to our wives receiving it that way. And I know traditionally for me, and this may be a male thing, but acts of service is a big way that I show love generically. And yet my wife is quality time. So
Yes.
I'm like, I'm doing all of this stuff for you. And she's like, just come and sit on the couch and watch a movie.
Yeah.
Or come and sit
Yes,
on the
that's
couch and
right.
cuddle. And I'm like, but I'm doing this stuff for you.
Yeah, and it seriously has ended many a marriage because you're not speaking the right language or you're not multilingual. And I think we need to be more like that, speaking as many of those languages as possible and not being held to one.
For the sake of time, we'll blow through the next couple. Support her, which I think is fairly obvious. Be a support in good and bad times. And again, perhaps even ask, how can I best support you in this season? Because sometimes, again, we can be speaking the wrong language even in that. Number 6, accept her faults. And this is a tricky one. Acceptance, and then, I think as men, I think we can all agree sometimes we try and go into fix-it mode as opposed to actually hearing and then trying to accept. Maybe just speak into that space, Steve, because again, we do tend to, if we hear something, we kind of go into that space. And again, we can often be very verbal about, well, here's all of your stuff. I've got a list here for you, darling.
The paradox in all of this is very ironic that for a woman to not want us to fix it is actually going to fix it for her. If we only attend and be present and can really listen and actually seek to understand. Husbands, listen, just seek to understand. And also, I know for my wife, when it comes to a language of apology, she needs to know that I understand what I did wrong. So understanding is so important.
Yeah.
If we can do that, we actually fix the problem. Isn't it funny? How it's actually
cool.
That's how we fix the problem by not fixing it. That's how it works. It's gold.
But how do we expect men to understand that, or live that way? That's the hard part.
Yeah, that is the hard bit. In a lot of ways in life, less is more. The less we try, the better things go a lot of the time. If we work in our own strength, we know this from a Christian theology viewpoint, the more we work in our own strength, the worse our lives go, the more we work in God's strength. And God's strength is in those moments of just listening and holding the space with their wives when they just want to share with us. And if she feels understood, that's intimacy, just so much intimacy in that.
Well, again, it's holding that safe space, right? And that's really, really important. Number 7, don't lose the romance, which again, we can tend to do. We can take the foot off the gas as guys. All the stuff we did in dating to catch the girl. And then when we get the girl, it all goes out the window. So we certainly need to be mindful of that. And again, speak a love language. I know for my wife, a big love language for her is words of affirmation. So whether that's verbal or written. And I know that just little notes or something around the house as a surprise, that's speaking her love language. And keeping the romance alive too, which again, it's going to look a little different.
Things like do the dishes, that sort of thing.
Doing the dishes.
Little note, the end of the bed. Please do the dishes before you leave.
Des, you and I will have a conversation with Steve after. We'll pray for you after the show. That's all good. Number 8, talk things through. Again, communicating, keeping communication alive. It's huge. And number 9, I think let's scoot to that. Take care of your wife. Now that seems fairly obvious, but Steve, I mean, if we break that down, I've always said care and kindness, particularly kindness, I think is such an incredible gift to give somebody.
Empathy is a huge thing in all of this. If only we can put ourselves into her shoes and try and understand what the competing pressures are for her on the day, how we can help. And that is not just an acts of service thing. That could be being patient and kind, being prepared to do something that she doesn't anticipate us to do. Just a little gift, and not necessarily a physical gift, but just taking care. It's actually putting ourselves into the other person's position, and we know it's when it's working. This is the test when we know it's working, when they actually really appreciate it, and it comes from their heart. We know that okay, we're on here. We've got this. So that's a good sign.
We've rattled through a show of being a good / godly husband, and we always thought that we might need a couple of shows. So we are going to come back with Pastor Steve Wickham next week and continue this conversation. There is so much more to unpack on this, being a good / godly husband. So we'll get Steve back next week. In the meantime, love you to have a look around our website, momentumaustralia.org. YouTube channel there, of course, you can watch the shows as well. And don't forget the care line, 1-800-000-636, 1-800-000-636, if you'd like a confidential conversation. Des, my friend, thank you. Steve, we'll see you next week right here on Momentum.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org. Until next time, keep moving forward with Momentum.